touch on two things there before we go over to Dan. Is one, it's interesting because you use the term network. And I remember one thing that let me down prior, another reason I wanted to start the coalition is, previously in like strength and conditioning, if there was a quote unquote networking event at a conference, it was always some crappy lunch or dinner at some nondescript conference room where like 300 people that are kind of putting on a front or a facade were in, and maybe you exchange business cards, but like nothing really came out of that,
that's
right?
Not
like,
networking.
no, that's not networking. And like I wrote an article a long time ago called like networked or networking. And because most people go into those things just feeling like, what can I get out of it? As opposed to what can they do? And I thought that was always problematic too, because you always hear about networking and I'm like, what is it at this point? Like if anything, that term, it always turned me off. And so like you speak into community and everything is a huge piece there. And I think another valuable thing you said is speaking like, get around people with different mentalities. There are a lot of people that think they're improving, but really they're just in an echo chamber. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be in control or the lead in everything that I do in my life. Like I like being around other people now where like, I don't mind feeling dumb. I don't mind feeling like, okay, I'm the student. There needed to be some points in my life after because I'd coach people all day and then you'd go home and then you'd be in charge of almost every aspect of your life. And so it just felt good to let go a little bit. Did you have something there before we go to Dan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love what you're talking about there with networked, or are you, or network? Is that what it is?
Just like networked ED or networking, meaning like you always felt like you got worked over by somebody. There was always an angle.
Totally. Well, and what I think about like networking, right? And when you're doing it in a way that's actually going to be advantageous to everybody involved is you're building relationships. And professional personal relationships that they want to see everybody succeed with, like networking or networks, like you're talking about, where you're just in a room and like collecting business cards. Like, man, that just doesn't do anything. Like in a little bit more lighthearted way or example, like that's why we stopped going to, as a company, we stopped going to like massive like 5Ks or races and setting up a tent or whatever, like all these other businesses do, because what we realized is we were just getting networked, right? Like everyone's just coming to our table wanting free shit. Like nobody's like really wanting to understand like what we do. And we're not building any relationships in that 20-second time frame that we get from somebody. So it was very transactional versus a deep relationship. And it's never a place you want to be.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think even vendors, people that are going to, a lot of our sponsors have said, that they value going to things that are smaller and more intimate now, as opposed to these like mega events or like you said, 5Ks, because they just realize people come for the free thing. They never really get to know them. Dan, how about you? Give us a little insight into your background and when you felt like, all right, it's time to find a community because the traditional ways of improving professionally and personally just weren't cutting it.
Yeah. So this year, my coaching mileage hit its 20th year. And so I started off on the gym floor, big box gym, and I did my years in being a personal trainer. I took a fairly traditional path, should we say, for the first decade. I developed, stepped away, developed my own business, and eventually I opened my own gym. And then I started a family and I needed to pivot and things needed to change. I have a son with very complex needs and that changed everything for me. And at that point, I had some real big constraints put on me. And I needed to think outside the box and how I was going to continue developing, because there was no way I was going to stand still. There was no way I was going to be like, okay, this is me now. I needed to keep pushing on. And what I found was like, I just kept coming across these mentors and communities, and actually nobody was listening. It was just a case of, hey, I'd explain my story and what was going on. And essentially what I wanted to do was coach, make it scalable, but without diluting it. I didn't want it to be like, okay, let's just take this cookie cutter approach. And every single quote unquote mentor was just trying to direct me down that. And what I loved when I came to the coalition was I was like, okay, cool. Someone's listening to where I am. Someone's taken on board the constraints that I have, and isn't just like, trying to funnel me down a certain path. Instead, it's like, okay, cool. Let's figure this out. Where do we want to be? Let's develop a roadmap. And you're doing that alongside a bunch of people from different backgrounds who are all kind of going in the same direction, but not necessarily to the same point.